Thank you for coming back from lunch and listening to us talk about what's a very interesting, important, and timely topic, I believe. I'm Nisa Amoils. I have run a fund in this space since 2016. I've also been writing for Forbes for about 5 years, have done a bunch of different media on the side, had a show called the Digital Asset Report on Bloomberg, and have just generally played a media person on TV. And I'm also a securities lawyer by training. Very happy to be here from New York and seeing the Chicago ecosystem thrive. I will ask my panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Dele Atanda. I run a company called metaMe. We effectively focus on personal information ownership and sovereignty through and provide people with personal AI, so really matching data and AI together to create a framework whereby people can convert their data into assets that they can use to generate revenue, generate income, but also improve their outputs and productivity through personalized AI services.
And I'm Kolbe from Impact Partners, co-founder. Full disclosure, we work with Paul on some of his public relations, strategic communications. We represent family offices, funds, and founders. So it's families, funds, founders, kind of the holy trinity of that. And the reason it's set up that way is it helps you open up a lot of doors when you're working with the capital sources and then telling the stories about the portfolio clients. So that's where we focus. We really double down on strategic communications, media relations, and just putting the relationship side of public relations out there, which frankly feels like it's eroded a little bit in the digital age. I think it's going to be an interesting spot for communications like what we do in the Web3 world. So it's going to be really fun to talk about that in the future with this awesome panel.
Hi there, I'm Michael Luckoo, pilot by trade, so a little different than the media side of things, but a technologist at heart. In the future, we think that data, digital currencies should be owned by the user. Our fundamental belief with Cirus is value back to users, and so we think that every interaction online should be a part of that. That goes from advertising to media to how everybody engages in the internet. Web3 is the future for people to be a benefactor of it. So working with media and actually educating people around the space is probably our first approach. Hopefully we're doing a good job.
Great. So we have lived through an evolution of narratives in this space, right? How do you think media has contributed to some of the policy issues that we're facing right now, or some of the heroes that were built up in the name of religion in crypto, like FTX, et cetera? So what do you think about how mainstream media or trade media has contributed to where we are right now in the cycle? Good, Jay.
Kick it off. Well, I think there's a little bit of a us versus them mentality, and I think one of the things that we're trying to work on is helping Web3 companies and innovative startups in the digital age learn how to communicate in a way that aligns a little bit more with the existing system. The existing system is centralized. Media, if you're seeking validation, there's a centralized resource for that validation, that confirmation of like who you are, why you matter, and not just what you say, but other people will say that you do it well too, and we'll support you. And I think the issues have come from the fact that there's one group of people who are coming from an entirely different ethos for the future, but they have to depend on the people who are in the existing now, who are more centralized, to kind of like get it out there for them. And I think that's the problem and so how the media's contributed to that is that they're a different monster than Web3, and they haven't learned how to interact yet. And it goes both ways. You got to learn how to, win them over and earn the right for them to validate you without disrupting them, right? Because people are people. If you show up and you say, hey, I'm going to blow up your world and change everything about it, and everything that you do is wrong, guess what? They're not going to share your story. So, it's a little bit of a coming together and hybridization, I think, that needs to happen, and I don't think that that's happened. I think the media, sees it coming, and they're like, we're gonna tamp you down, and I think there are some things that I witness on a day-to-day basis from Web3 communicators that are asking to be tamped down. So, meet in the middle, but right now I don't think we're doing that. So I think the media's just, I think how they've contributed, they've woven a little bit, I think, of a reaction to the hyperbole that they've received to kind of say, hey, got tired of hearing it from you, now it's all falling apart, so I'm gonna step on you while you're down. And so I think that's how we're seeing it right now. And then there's just the natural setup of media, which is, generally speaking, it tones negative, right? They love the fire, right? Because people click on it. So that's kind of, I think, where we're at.
Just love to add to that too. I think it has to be an educative approach to everything. Working with impact partners as well, it was a series of interviews before we even got media placement. So it wasn't just like, here's our way we can get you in front of Forbes or ad placements, and here's our headliner. So we actually went through a process before we could do that, and I actually felt more at that position than anything, but for the right reason. And what happened with FTX, if the media was a little bit more informed about the technology and the impact of the space, I think it would have been portrayed much differently. If we actually use the fundamentals of Web3, decentralization, FTX wouldn't have happened. It's completely disjointed from the technology itself. So much of the media just kind of shrouds that effect of Web3, crypto being a scam, all that decentralization puts into one bucket. And I think it's fundamentally wrong, because now we are associating all of this stuff, especially in this room, with innovation and the pursuit of building a better future with one event and one centralized actor. So I think that education has to be the forefront, and yeah.
Or multiple actors, but
Absolutely.
yeah. Any thoughts?
I think you summed it up with multiple actors. That's sort of the whole proposition of decentralization, really, in that regards. It's hard to blame the media solely for it. I guess it's a cultural thing. And, the media's, let's face it, media's been in a really tough spot as a result of digitalization generally for the last 2 decades. They're struggling to find a business model and find relevance. And so I guess they're all fighting for survival in this new world in that regards as well. I guess, I think there's a more systemic problem around the culture of the space, the culture of technology generally, and hero worship, as you say, the heroes that we paint. When you get to the point that you're talking about billions and trillions of dollars, and when you start to get to things like democratic processes, you have to really question, is really the iconic model, the college graduate whose cerebral cortex isn't even completely formed yet, to make judgments. It's true, right? To be able to make the judgments about what needs to be in place. So I think this is a question we need to ask ourselves a little bit more fundamentally and help media. I think Michael's right in terms of education, because these poster boys, these heroes that are being held up as the champions of crypto are a misrepresentation of what the industry really is about. So how do we help them understand what it really stands for?
So do you think there's a way to solve for that? Because in the name of religion, you're pushing a new technology, you've got to have these heroes, right? And then tribalism, and like fighting about something, whether it's maxi this, maxi that, right? So do you think there's a solution for that?
So, yes, and I think it's not an overnight switch though. I think, for me, I'm leaning into this idea of decentralized information systems. And I think, it's my kind of narrative of the day that money is a great decentralized information system. Cryptocurrency is effectively a use case of money as a decentralized information system. But money is a simple asset type compared to information. And ultimately, what we're looking for, because it's a disease of misinformation of one ilk or another that we're talking about. So the power of decentralized information systems is trustless information that you can believe in. It's a kind of truth, right? That's what it really represents. So this is what we need to inject, kind of build as a foundational platform on. If the media actually has a decentralized information system network resource to tap into, not just in terms of control of money, but in terms of control of narrative, in terms of stories and information about the ecosystem, what's real, what's actually happening, then that's a better foundation upon which to build. It doesn't address the cultural issue of heroes, but we can start to have a foundation where we can start to build up new images of what heroism is based on that primal truth.
But I think the most important part is, like, again, meeting in the middle. It's not us versus them. Like you said, the media business is hard. It has not gotten easier in the last 2 decades. I've done PR for media properties. The whole event space exists because that's actually where they create revenue. They don't make it like you write all day long, run ads, and make no money. And so, you gotta embrace them. And I feel like when I work with a lot of people in Web3, again, there tends to be a disconnected ethos between what they are and what they want to do and what they view the media's role in that next phase. And that state at a baseline, irrespective of everything else, is not going to create the state that's a winning state for Web3. It just isn't. You can't marginalize those people who've been decades of the validators of like what's good in business, pushing news out over social media, saying crazy stuff that isn't checked by anybody, deciding that every press release sounds like a marketing release. And it's like at some point you're really kind of sowing your own, you're digging your own grave. And they want to get you back, and they're humans, and humans are humans, and they'll be human, they'll do human things. And if you try to disintermediate them, and you don't meet them in the middle, and you kind of say, hey, there's no use for you, that my future state doesn't include you, well, I think it's pretty self-fulfilling. And that's the thing that really is like tough. And we work with a lot of companies. When we decided to get into this space, one of the things that we did is we really leaned into things that were going to be trying harder to be regulated, and things that are trying to be more bridges and connections of two disparate worlds. So if you're TradFi, put that with DeFi. If you're the blend, the hybridization of things. And I think that's the part that I think gets missed, is that for now everything that's going to be successful is going to be a hybrid, right? And it is not black and white. And when you walk out there with a black and white philosophy, you're going to lose. And other people who get that game, who don't deserve it, are going to win. Now, ultimately, it all comes out in the wash. At the end of the day, people figure it out and it all comes unraveled. But right now, it's just learn how to coexist and hybridize like you're thinking, because that's going to help you get validated. And it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice what you're going to do next. Your dream for decentralization. I'm sure there's plenty of people in media. I mean, we look at the creator economy and how we view media right now. It is being decentralized as we speak. There is a place for media in a decentralized world. But yeah, you can't make it us versus them. There's just that everyone loses in that equation.
Michael, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, that's well said.
But you're doing something in terms of democratizing and crowdfunding, right? Do you want to add that element to it?
Oh, we democratize value data, right? So across the board, we look at how these big platforms have been built. $113 billion for Facebook advertising last year alone. $0 went back to the users, right? So we know the kind of called the original sin of the internet was just advertising, because that's where all that value was created, and it was only sent to the platform. So I think if we just follow the money trail of where everything goes, we could see that media is spending more on advertising. $300 billion, in fact, in 2023 alone. So as long as there is an incentive to find clicks through advertising for media, then there's going to be a lack of motivation to put out real news and a real authorship of substance. And unless there's a de-incentive to put out information that doesn't have real substance and authorship, then we need to tip that scale. So in one way that we can do that is by creating more of a value shared economy on the internet. And that way advertising is not just wrapped up into one big pot of value, it's spread throughout the internet and users have the rights as well. We can start to help media by saying, we want to vote on this authorship because we think it's provably secure, it's accurate, it's good information. So I think the internet economy is eventually going to evolve this way. But as long as there's a high incentive for advertising, there's going to be less motivation for people putting out real information. And that's just the raw truth.
So is now the time, because was Civic too early?
Yes.
Yes, Civic, for those who don't know, had tried to democratize media. Exactly what you're talking about. It was like 2018, I think, right? Okay. And now we have AI in the equation. So is this the right time to try something like that again?
It's a big question here. A lot of platforms like Steemit, Civic, try to disintermediate and say, we'll pay the right authors with the users of the platform, and create some substance to this. Authorship also should be thought about from provenance, where the source of truth is coming from, and that person who is labeled with putting out this piece of information is carried across all platforms. So there is it's a standard that essentially is attached to that person who's putting out information in media. I think that is also going to be a huge component in decentralization. So as long as we can show provenance through decentralization, which is the source, we could use AI, we could use the way people putting out information with advertising and factually say this is accurate or not. And I think that if we do that, there's a bigger incentive than just small platforms like Civic as well.
So AI will solve the deep fake problem, right? Or allegedly, or WorldCoin will, right?
AI's got major problems already with deepfake embedded into the systems, and I think Web3 can solve that. That's a whole different discussion.
Yeah, I think I heard somebody say one time that the #1 application of AI right now is to fight AI or to disintermediate AI. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So Jay, what's the benefit of being on background or cultivating these relationships? Can you elaborate a little bit more about
relationships? I mean, at the end of the day, humans, every aspect of business involves a human. For now, I mean, we talk about other versions of that. I don't see that, but humans are humans, and if we always tell people, I'm not going in there trying to, as a PR person, spin everything. I'm trying to make it mutually beneficial because I want to come back again and do it again and again and again. And I also want to sit in front of somebody who might be writing something I don't agree with or doesn't fit with what my clients want to do, and be able to kind of move them off that position into a new position that we feel is more positive or strategic. We've done that with Paul a few times, where there was one about Microsoft and Activision and all, and we turned it into a story about innovation and startups, and the whole piece was all about people just answering the question that the media asked, but we told them what they needed to know, right? And I think that gets lost sometimes, is you got to have the relationship and the trust to go in there and actually shape those stories. Because again, if you're adversarial, you're not going to shape anything. That story's going to come out the way it's going to come out, and you're going to have no influence over that, and you're leaving yourself on the sidelines. Going background, providing information, being helpful as a human being will get a reciprocal response most of the time. And that's the key to all of this. And it isn't like collusion. It's that these people are moving fast. They don't want to fight. They want to learn. They want to do the good thing, the right thing. But you have to be a part of their lives. You have to take time to communicate with them. One of the biggest challenges that I run into is that people just want to push everything out. And we always well, why? And half the time, they don't even know why. They're just go, 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 go. It's well, why don't you stop for a second? Let us organize our thoughts, find out who we want to put in front of that. Time's the biggest challenge with most people. Give them the time to process the information. Give them the time to have a relationship with you so that they trust that that's not poor information, and then build the story that you want collectively with the media person. It doesn't happen any other way, right? So go on background, be accessible, be smart, and don't be over the top marketing the whole time, because nobody wants that. The media are not there to be your marketing tool. Be a partner. Tell a story about what's next. They all want to tell a story about what's next, right? They can't see it through the noise. So you have to sit down, slow them down, build a relationship, build a trust, and they have it to be a collective thing that happens. And that's why you go on background. That's why you offer people exclusives on news. You sit down and we're going to walk through this and tell you why it matters. Because if you're just putting it in a press release and pushing it out, they don't even know what half that stuff means, right? And that's your fault. That's your fault for not educating. And then when you don't like what comes out the back end, well, you own a piece of that.
Dele, any anecdotes, success stories you want to share?
I mean, I think I'm resonating around Civic and and that model, the world is a different place from where it was in 2018, right? I mean, 2018 was pre-pandemic, pre-January 6th. So, I agree with you, Jay. I think the media has got to be brought along. I don't know that there is, I don't personally have an adversarial relationship with the media at all. I think the question is, I think as an industry, right, it's a question of, does Web3 actually matter? You know, I've heard so many people say, AI, I understand that. I understand why that's relevant. I understand how that's going to make a difference in my life. Whereas Web3, it's kind of like a back-end system thing that I don't really understand what real utility it has. So I feel it's like more about the story of Web3 itself is, you know, it's not clear, the value proposition. And media's got to be part of that solution.
So we have felt that way for a very long time, and we're going to be doing a show about that actually at NASDAQ, where we talk about the real utility and the real world use cases, the things that most journalists are not talking about, because we feel like that's really important for policymakers and other constituents. But I think you're absolutely right. There was a lot more clicks generated on price movements or speculation, and so that's where the stories went. And I think that's a large part why we are where we are right now.
Yeah, and validation, you know, again, coming back to, if you say that this is going to change the world, it's amazing, and you can't produce a single person who go on record to say the same thing, then that just falls short every time. You know, that's not how the world works. If it's great, someone's going to say it's great. Someone's going to stand next to you and be like, this is amazing. I love it for this. This is how I use it. This is how it changed our business. This is how we made more money, had better relationships with customers, or whatever it is. There's going to be someone there next to you. And I think some of what we've seen to date in the media is a mixture of not just being organized to understand how to do that as a professional communicator, but it's also that some of those examples are still kind of brewing. We're still trying to figure out what those are and where the durable use cases are and where the adoption, you know, Odyssey, you know, that's a big deal. You know, we should really follow that closely. That's one of the biggest things out there in a durable use case. That story about Starbucks and what they wanted to do, like, we need to capture that. That needs to be, you know, a North Star for everybody. And, you know, just keep in mind, you know, if you're really amazing, doing amazing things, someone's going to stand next to you and corroborate that, and just bring them with you when you talk to the press.
And a lot of it is when we were building Web 2, we didn't have social media to debate the merits of HTTP versus FTP versus CMTP, whatever, SMTP, right? But here, there's so much focus on layer ones, layer twos, like the actual infrastructure and debating the merits of it, that the actual use cases get lost in that.
Well, in the fundraising, the tokenization, and like just the pumping the community and all of that stuff is very kind of counterintuitive to that press model, right? Because like what you need to do to get, you know, the pigeons, calm the pigeons, and, you know, get the token raise going, you know, is a completely different beast than earning validation from third parties. You know, you control a lot of that. And we had a really great conversation about this one time, Dele. Maybe you want to share, but you know, fascinated by like the energy that goes into kind of some of the token, you know, the community and feeding them, and like, you know, that model, and how you just gotta, it's just like this churn. It's like when you read about like the Instagrammers and the YouTubers who are like all stressed out because they're like every day they have to go all day to like come up with all the ideas, and they all break down and burn out. You know, doing an ICO and token and decentralized you know, fundraising is part of that challenge. And I think a lot of founders don't know how to like understand that, like, hey, you know what's better than just saying something's coming? Like actually delivering a really amazing, you know, corroborated story from an outlet that everyone knows globally does quality work, and giving that to your community. Because they're gonna love that. They always love, I've seen it. It's like they go crazy for that when someone validates them. And it isn't just someone from the company saying, hey, good things are coming. And I think you said like it took you a little while to figure out that one was better than the other, because the pigeon's on you all day long, just like pounding, and you just gotta like, the only thing that stops is like telling them something. But sometimes you have to stop and say, hey, well, why not really give them something?
No, absolutely. I mean, we did a crowdfunding campaign. We spun out a media, a narrative, a media property, like a creative content property, a crypto comic saga. And we did crowdfunding on it. And yeah, it is a beast. And that's kind of part of the culture of crypto, crowdfunding. It's always been, that's what the ICOs were about, effectively. And you do have to, but it's challenging, right? Because I think you're looking for market validation, user feedback in some regards. You're looking for media attention. And sometimes you have to kind of create a bit of a storm with the hope that you will get media attention. It's a really tricky landscape, and I actually think AI's gonna make the problem worse, and we're already seeing this with AI, because it's still the golden rule of computing, which still hasn't changed, is garbage in, garbage out, and we're still seeing a lot of garbage coming out. One exercise that I recommend everyone does here, if you really want to kind of get a look at this, not Google yourself, ChatGPT yourself. Ask ChatGPT who you are, and then go layers deeper, and you'll see the fabrication, the hallucinations that it's conjuring up. And this is just going to get worse. So I think your point, Michael, about provenance and kind of really getting to verifiable content, information that can be trusted, and using that to build the AI economy is critical. Otherwise, it's just going to get worse.
Okay, I think we're almost out of time, so I just want to open it up to any questions from the audience.
What would you say is, and this is for Jay, what would you say, do you think that the rollout, that from what's reputable, you mentioned reputable like sources, like publications, what would you say is like your top reputable like publications for getting like really like factual and good technology news?
Well, first of all, you have to understand there's sometimes when I have this conversation, people forget how hard it is actually to pump out like multiple stories every day and to get everything right. Like that's really, really hard. That's a ton of work. And so sometimes people come along and be like, oh, this person got that wrong, things of that nature. And somehow like all of a sudden the Wall Street Journal doesn't matter because they messed something up. That is completely unfair. That's crazy. That's just a dumb way to think. Like that completely overlooks the reality of how challenging it is to be an actual journalist and like figure out that every last thing in that piece is right. That's a ton of work, and they don't always get it right. So I come at that question more as like, I know what it takes for certain type of publications, like how much work we have to do to convince them and how much work we have to do to get them to what they do, and the fact that like a lot of times they don't actually do what we want them to do, and it's hard because they're going to do the thing. So I think for me, the Wall Street Journal is one of the hardest ones out there to manage. They're going to ask all the hard questions. They're going to put you in a corner. Like if you can get through one of those interviews, you can do anything. And that is a publication that straight up is just reporting. Like everyone who works there is like a dogged reporter. They don't want a single word in that piece to be wrong or challengeable. And that means that like you can't BS your way through anything. They're going to ask you to prove everything that you say. If they're going to put it in there, they're going to want it corroborated. And that's a lot of work, and they're the top bar. As the Post is also up there. You get into Fortune and some Forbes and Fast Company's really hard. Like they're super hard. So like a lot of those kind of big monolithic, been around for a while, business type publications I say are the hardest ones. TechCrunch is another one that used to be better than they are now. I will say. I think they haven't figured out how to be as fast and good as they used to be, but. That's where I would start, and it comes down to me, not necessarily anything more than I just know the ringer they put us through whenever we work with them. Those are some of the ones that really stand out to me. And I will say one thing, like Forbes is a tricky one because there was a time when Forbes let way too many people contribute to that publication, so it completely watered down their brand, but the real reporters at Forbes were always really hard to work with. They were challenging.
All right.
How do you see AI changing PR marketing?
That's tricky. It's clear that AI is a great tool for speed and helping you kind of get from point A to point B. Creating content, make sure that it's targeted to the right people. tone, all that stuff. I think there's, we use a tool called Profit that's created by Stagwell, which is a media holding company that does some of that for you. But I think that honestly, when it comes right down it, human relations are so vital, and they've been watered down so much in the digital age that I think that if AI is doing anything more than helping you get to better human relations, then it's probably going to be a little bit off in PR. If you completely rely on AI, there's, to Dele's point, God knows what it's going to say, and if it says it and it gets printed, like, boom, that's religion. And I can't even imagine how bad a scenario like that could go down if you rely on too much. You need somebody there with the intuition and experience to understand that, word usage and even how it's framed in a sentence, matters. That's what we do. We literally pore over sentences and is that what you really mean? And if it's clumsy, we go back to the reporter and we get it fixed. But if you're letting AI do that, you're going to have a bunch of that. So it helps you with, again, menial speed tasks. I think there's room for it. But I think if you let it do too much, you're going to have a nightmare on your hands.
Where it could be interesting actually is in provenance verification, validation of sources, really down upstream, I suppose, in the supply chain. I think you can get the fundamentals right, and then you can actually then hold journalists more accountable effectively by way of this audit trail. And you can make that audit trail public. That could be something that could be interrogated. So I think there's a, decentralized information system network could be quite interesting.
Put it on chain.
Exactly.
One way that they're doing it now, last one here, is that there's technology to see if it's actually AI-generated content versus human intervention. So there's going to be labeling versus 100% human or AI-generated. And there's tech now to actually find and filter that, which is actually really cool. So the dilemma is going to be between man and machine, and where is that input actually coming from? So I think with media, to some of the publications, they'll actually start labeling the generation of that content, where it actually is sourced from. I think that definitely adds some credibility as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Panel.